Hello everyone, my name is Daniel. I'm creating this video about anxiety, panic attacks, depression, low self-esteem, insecurity because about 1 in every 5 people will suffer from one or more of these conditions to the point where they have to take action in order to improve the quality of their lives. According to the University of Cambridge, more than 8 million people suffer from an anxiety disorder in the UK and more than 40 million people in the United States. So it's becoming a major problem in society that requires attention because the number of victims is increasing every single year. And I was one of them. From the age of 16 to the age of 24, I suffered from severe anxiety, depression, and I would have a panic attack almost every single day. And I was also very insecure. And after 7 years of suffering and desperately searching for answers, I was finally able to recover myself. And I created a non-profit project with the goal of helping as many people as possible through live seminars, group therapy, and individual guidance. I also created this video to share with you the step-by-step process of what I did to overcome 7 years of personal suffering. I hope you enjoy and share it with those who need it.
The name of this presentation is Mindless. And I chose that name because most people that suffer from anxiety, insecurity, depression, panic attacks, and low self-esteem know that the origin of most of these problems is in the mind. And sometimes it feels like if we were living with our worst enemy inside our minds. The purpose of Mindless is to help you unleash your true potential, awaken your true essence, and ultimately and most important, to eliminate suffering. And for you to be able to eliminate suffering, you need to understand first where it comes from. And not only for you and me, because we are not the only ones that have experienced anxiety, low self-esteem, depression, panic attacks, insecurity. No, there are millions of people out there suffering from the same problems. And we need to understand why. Where does it all come from? And for you to be able to see that, I want you to ask yourself the following question. If we were to mentally diagnose the entire history of human beings as if it were the story of only one person, what would the final conclusion about this person be? Let's say that the entire history of humanity is the past of only one person, and we were to mentally diagnose that person. What would the conclusion about this person be? We could say that all of the followings would apply to this person: cruelty, stress, depression, envy, insecurity, obsession, compulsion, anxiety, aggressiveness, psychopath, madness, dementia, violence, phobias, selfishness, and many more. And these right here are only a few of the problems of society and humankind. And we need to understand why, so that way we can free ourselves from the root cause of the problem and eliminate suffering. What's the root cause of all suffering? And the answer to this question is very simple. And most people think that they know or they understand what I'm going to talk about, but they really don't. Because if they did, things would have been very different for you and me, and for many others. And here is the answer to this question: the ego. Most people think that the ego is feeling superior to others, or thinking that you're better than all those around you. But they have no clue. let me explain what the ego is, how it's making you suffer from anxiety, panic attacks, depression, low self-esteem, and how you can free yourself from it. Ego in Latin means I. For psychology, it means the identification with the mind, in which the individual recognizes himself as myself and is aware of his own identity in his mind. In other words, and for easier understanding, your ego is your conscious mind, the part of your identity that you consider yourself. If you say someone has a big ego, then you are saying he is too full of himself. Basically, the ego is the relationship that you have with yourself in your own mind through your inner voice. And most people think that it is normal to have a relationship with themselves in their minds, that it is normal to use the inner voice in their minds to have conversations with themselves while they're waiting in the bus. For example, I'm waiting for the bus and I start thinking to myself, oh no, I have to go to work today, and there are going to be so many people in that meeting. What if I start getting social anxiety and people start staring at me? Why am I so insecure? I really wish I was more confident. On that last argument I had with my boss, it would have been so cool if I had told him everything I think about him. But the problem is that when you live your life through your ego, you start identifying yourself with your mind and your thoughts, and thoughts can be so random and so self-destructive that your emotional and mental health will be basically affected all the time by whatever is going through your head. And you know this is right because if your thoughts were wonderful all the time and super positive and you could control them, then you wouldn't be suffering from anxiety in the first place, depression, panic attacks, insecurity, low self-esteem, and many other things. And this is why the ego is so destructive and is the root cause of suffering for so many people. And they don't know that because they think that they are their ego. The good news is that I'm going to teach you how to free yourself from it. And I want to show you also what's the real purpose of the mind and thoughts. So let's continue to the definition of the mind. Throughout history, the mind has been conceived in different categories as a substance distinct from the body, a part, a process, or a property whose function is to give origin to thoughts. So after reading this definition, we can see that the mind is only a part, a process, or a property whose function is to give origin to thoughts. It doesn't say that we are the mind. And it's not for us to create our identity from it. No, it's only a tool to give birth to thoughts. Now let's see what's the purpose of thoughts and the definition of thoughts. Thoughts. The term defines all the products that the mind can generate, including the rational activities of the intellect or the abstractions of the imagination, irrational, creative, artistic, etc. The thought could be defined as images, daydreams, or that inner voice that accompanies us during the day and at night in the form of dreams. So after reading this, we can see that thoughts can be irrational, creative, artistic, or the abstractions of the imagination. And we do not want to compromise our mental and emotional stability based on the abstractions of the imagination. That is why we are not meant to identify ourselves with our thoughts. We are not meant to create our identity based on what's going on through our minds, because thoughts can be irrational, random abstractions of the imagination. So let's continue reading the third definition. The thought process is a means of planning the action and of overcoming the obstacles between what is and what is projected. After reading the third definition, we can see that the thought process is a means of planning the action and overcoming obstacles. But when you are not using your thoughts to plan an action or to overcome an obstacle in the present moment, but instead you are sitting home and thinking to yourself, why am I so insecure? I wish my life had been different. Nobody likes me. I wish I could be more confident and normal. Why do I suffer from anxiety? Why do I feel so depressed? If you're doing this, then you are using your mind for something different than its original purpose. Okay, so now that you understand the ego, the purpose of the mind and thoughts, let's see how and why we create an ego in the first place, and how we start developing a relationship with ourselves in our minds, and how we get to the point of suffering. Let's read the purpose of the ego. The ego is generated as a mechanism that keeps safe the integrity of the individual. Let me explain this with an example. Let's say that you're 10 years old and you're playing out with your friends and you're enjoying the present moment. And your dad drops by to pick you up and take you home. And he kisses you in the forehead in front of your friends as a way of saying hello. And your friends start making fun of you. So next time you're playing again with your friends and your dad comes to pick you up, your inner voice awakens for a moment and you think to yourself, I can't let him kiss me in the forehead. My friends are going to make fun of me. And you tell your father, Dad, please don't kiss me. And for the first time, you felt uncomfortable because your friends laughed at you. And that's a normal thing. It's perfectly understandable. And that's not going to make anybody suffer from anxiety, depression, or panic attacks. That happens to all of us. But when we go through so many difficult situations and we suffer a lot, or when we are put under constant pressure, then that self-defense mechanism will get out of control. And our inner voice will continue to wake up more and more every day, to the point that we are no longer living life in the present moment, but we are living 90% of the day in our minds, talking to ourselves. And that's when we develop anxiety, panic attacks, depression, low self-esteem, insecurity. Because that inner relationship we create with ourselves in our own minds, and all that inner talking is basically a product of many difficult situations that we went through in life. It's full of insecurity. That inner talk is full of self-doubt. It's in the constant search of fulfillment. And this is also the reason why not everyone suffers from anxiety, panic attacks, depression, low self-esteem, insecurity, because some develop a stronger ego and a stronger relationship with themselves in their minds because of all the hard things that they went through in life. And those who had a normal life and don't suffer from anything simply live more in the present moment and are not thinking about anything. Origin of the ego. The ego is born when the human being becomes aware of his conditioning. He perceives confusedly at first and then clearly the narrow sense of his own limits. So according to this definition, we understand that if we live life through the ego, we will be full of mental barriers. and all the limits that were set in your life by others with negative comments like, "You're not good at this, you're such a failure, you do not deserve this." So the ego also means conditioning. And what are the consequences of the ego in our lives? Every problem that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. Cruelty, stress, depression, envy, insecurity, obsession, compulsion, anxiety, aggressiveness, madness, dementia, violence. Do you think a murderer would kill someone else if he wasn't talking to himself in his mind into doing it? Probably not. So most of the problems you can think of in society are related to the ego. Now the only question left is, how can we stop this and free ourselves? And that's what we're going to learn next. Letting go of the ego. So it is not about working on the ego, changing it, or improving it. It's about letting it go. It's not about making it more confident. It's about vanishing it. Many people that suffer from anxiety, low self-esteem, depression, or insecurity are told to think positive and to try to change their negative thought patterns. But the truth is that those things only work temporarily. I tried affirmations for many years, and the only thing that I accomplished was to become even more addicted to thinking and to being in my mind all the time. And as soon as I stopped repeating the affirmations, negative thoughts would come back and I would start feeling anxiety again. And the reason why none of those things work long term is because we are not meant to live our lives inside our minds. Or do you remember yourself as a child repeating affirmations to yourself all the time, trying to feel more confident? No. Because when we were children and before we suffered from anxiety or anything else, we were 90% of the time in the present moment and not thinking about anything. So the only way for you to recover your mental and emotional stability is for you to start letting go of your ego. And by taking your mind back to the present moment, little by little, to recover its normal state of peace. The only way to break the pattern of any wrong behavior is first of all recognizing it. Rosa Wynn. So now that you understand what your ego is and all the suffering that is causing you, you no longer want it to continue dominating your life. Now let's look at the step-by-step process to start letting go of the ego. First, distance yourself from the ego. That means that every time you catch yourself talking to yourself in your own mind, you need to stop and understand that you are not your inner voice or your thoughts. Second, come back to the present moment. The present moment is the most precious thing that we can experience, and it's the only way that we can achieve long-term peace in our lives. Living in the present moment means that you are completely centered on the here and now. When you are not in your mind having any thoughts, worrying about the future, or thinking about the past. Every time you go into your mind to start with the obsessive thinking, try to come back to the present moment and focus your attention on your breathing, the noises around you, or focus on whatever you are doing now. Third step, meditation. Meditation is a wonderful tool that people misunderstand. Some say that it is to connect yourself with the spiritual world or things like that, but that's not true. The only purpose of meditation is to train your mind to be in the present moment and to achieve peace. The mind is like a muscle. If you train it to think all the time, it will make it a habit, to the point where you won't be able to stop thinking for a couple of moments, even if you wanted to. So meditation is the opposite of that. It is training your mind to recover its natural state of peace. And what happens after your ego starts fading away? You start living your life under your true essence. And how is the life of a person that lives under the true essence and not the ego? It's a life full of peace, confidence, freedom, limitless, no fear, and last but most important, mental and emotional stability. Do you want to continue living your life under the illusion of the ego? I hope not. So I followed these 3 steps every single day, and within 3 months I was able to claim my life back and recover the peace that I had lost for 7 years. And if I was able to do it, so are you. If you need help because you're struggling and having a hard time managing whatever you're going through right now, and you would like some help applying the principles in this video, send me an email and I'll be more than happy to help you without any interest of any kind.